Amidst the vast narrative of U.S. history lies a conflict that defines American imperialism, yet is often overshadowed. The Philippine American War showcases brutality, controversy, and a desire for both freedom and fortune. The Philippine American War, the Forgotten Freedom Fight. Around the turn of the 20th century, the more than 300-year-long conflict between the Spanish and the Philippines neared its end. On July 7, 1892, a confidential group of nationalist Filipinos under the leadership of Andres Bonifacio formed the Katipunan. This group was comprised of middle-class Filipinos with the intent to expel Spanish forces and gain their independence. On August 23, 1896, the Katipunan revolted against the Spanish, primarily in Manila and Cavite. Nevertheless, the Spanish arrested, killed, and exiled numerous Filipinos, especially Emilio Aguinaldo, a prominent revolutionary general. Eventually, both sides of this conflict entered a stalemate and formed a truce known as the Biak na Bato in December of 1897. However, this truce was short-lived due to the eventual involvement of the United States.
Life before the war showcased much inequality. Women at this time of Filipino opposition were viewed as inferior and timid. Their social responsibilities comprised of fulfilling motherly roles and complying with their male relatives. Women tended to household chores, tobacco factories, and stores. Furthermore, almost all Filipinos lacked social, civil, and political rights at the time. Although Filipinos argued for equality in the church and among Spanish citizens, Filipinos were ultimately subjected to the absolute power of Spanish government and corrupt friars. Any Filipino who was believed to support radical ideas could be executed by the Spanish. Moreover, the invasion of foreign companies in the Philippines infringed upon the economic liberty of Filipinos through forced labor. However, the exposure to these foreign influences aroused an understanding of human rights and a need for revolution among Filipinos. In addition, the Katipunan were encouraged by ideas of redemption and prosperity expressed in Roman Catholicism. Thus, they felt responsible for achieving their freedom. Evidently, the extreme lack of rights in the Philippines developed a national identity among the Filipinos.
The United States took notice of the clash between the revolutionaries and Spanish forces in Cuba that lasted from 1895 to 1898. Multiple factors including pity from the U.S. public, the U.S. interest in removing European influence from the Western Hemisphere, and the explosion of the U.S. battleship Maine on February 15, 1898, encouraged the U.S. to interfere in Spanish endeavors. On April 20, 1898, U.S. Congress passed a joint resolution that allowed President William McKinley to use any military means necessary to establish the independence of Cuba. Due to the lack of Spanish compliance, the U.S. declared war against Spain on April 25, 1898. To begin the war, Commodore George Dewey and the U.S. Asiatic Squadron moved from Hong Kong and arrived in Manila Bay on May 1, 1898. Dewey launched a naval attack on the Spanish fleet guarding the Philippines, significantly weakening Spanish power. The U.S. gained control over Manila Bay, indicating the end of Spanish rule over the Philippines. In addition, Aguinaldo returned from Hong Kong. Doubtful of America's intent to occupy the Philippines, Aguinaldo alongside other Filipinos proclaimed the Philippine Declaration of Independence on June 12, 1898. They formed the First Philippine Republic and appointed Aguinaldo as president on January 1, 1899. Notably, Aguinaldo modeled the Republic's constitution after the U.S. to maintain proper ideas of human rights, especially freedom. On August 13, 1898, the Battle of Manila, also known as the Mock Battle of Manila, took place. Spanish forces agreed to secretly surrender to the Americans using a mock battle as a facade due to the risk of facing charges under Filipino governance. The U.S. set up a military government on August 14, 1898, in Manila and signed the Treaty of Paris on December 10th to transfer Spanish control of the Philippines to the U.S.
But the U.S. public opinion upon the annexation of the Philippines was extremely controversial. Americans saw military advantages against Asian countries alongside economic opportunities in the Philippines. Moreover, many committed to the concept of manifest destiny and American exceptionalism. They believed that Filipinos could not self-govern and required U.S. democratic guidance. Regardless, some Americans thought the annexation was immoral due to its infringement upon the human rights of Filipinos. For instance, the popular and influential writer Mark Twain argued that the annexation was unconstitutional and contradicted the U.S. interest in freedom that was previously displayed in Cuba. He wrote, "It should, it seems to me, be our pleasure and duty to make those people free, and let them deal with their own domestic questions in their own way. And so I am an anti-imperialist. I am opposed to having the eagle put its talons on any other land." Additionally, some simply wanted to limit the political rights of Filipinos in the U.S. government. They refused to let Filipinos have a voice in U.S. domestic policy.
Regardless of the US opinion, Filipino revolutionaries were outraged, not only because their oppressors got off scot-free, but also because US annexation of the Philippines would destroy any chance for Filipino independence. Thus, the Philippines decided that they wouldn't go down quietly. On February 4th, 1899, only 2 days before the Treaty of Paris was ratified, Aguinaldo and his Filipino army attacked US forces under General Elwell Otis in the Second Battle of Manila. This battle was the first and largest battle of the war, which sparked a chain of hostilities between the US and the Philippines. Subsequently, US forces captured the Philippine revolutionary capital of Malolos, weakening the Filipinos. Furthermore, on April 9, 1899, the US drove out Filipino forces from their stronghold in Santa Cruz. Aguinaldo even ordered the assassination of one of his best generals, Antonio Luna, to guarantee Filipino authority. By November 12, 1899, Aguinaldo was distraught due to the mounting US military successes in the war, so he organized his army into decentralized guerrilla commands with several military zones throughout the Philippines. This change in strategy let the Filipinos easily ambush American soldiers. Battles such as the Siege of Catubig on April 15, 1900, and the Battle of Macahambas Hill showcased the Philippine success against the US. Nevertheless, the superior US military eventually overwhelmed the morale and power of the Philippines. On March 23, 1901, Aguinaldo was captured by General Frederick C. Funston. Due to the loss of the Philippines' most critical leader, Aguinaldo announced on April 19, 1901, that the rebels must accept American sovereignty and lay down their arms. Finally, on July 4, 1902, Theodore Roosevelt announced a general amnesty and declared the conflict officially over.
The Filipinos already thought of themselves as an independent nation. Thus, they treated the conflict like a war between nations. Up to 100,000 Filipino soldiers tortured U.S. soldiers and those who sided with the U.S. Over 200,000 Filipino civilians died as a result of the violence, famine, and disease spread throughout the war. Nevertheless, Filipinos committed to numerous commendable civic, social, and legal responsibilities amidst the violence. Civilians funded their military through war taxes and treated the wounded. They also housed and fed soldiers. In contrast, the U.S. viewed the altercation as an insurrection against U.S. governance. The U.S. believed they had the legal right to manage Filipino rebels as criminals. Moreover, the U.S. strongly believed that Filipinos could not govern themselves and sought to introduce American democracy, education, and freedom. They wanted to peacefully civilize the Philippines.
Even so, the US neglected the Filipinos' rights to standard living and a voice in US governance. General Otis demanded absolute surrender from the Filipinos. Thus, he sometimes neglected US instructions to use personal, aggressive strategies and damage Filipino forces. The US built concentration camps, burned villages, and tortured suspected guerrillas to establish authority. In addition, General Jacob H. Smith ordered the execution of all male Filipinos above the age of 10 in the infamous pacification of Samar. Quote, "Kill and burn, kill and bomb. The more you kill and the more you bum, the better you will please me." End quote. Despite such barbarity, some Filipinos supported U.S. superiority and fought alongside them. For instance, Senor Buencamino of the Philippine Republic Cabinet proposed to the revolutionary leaders that their rights to freedom would remain in addition to proficient U.S. democracy if they submitted to the U.S. Notably, the U.S. began to shift towards a pacifist approach of the war. For example, the U.S. appealed to some elite Filipinos through their colonial government, formed in 1900 under William Howard Taft. The U.S. proposed the policy of attraction, a peaceful plan that guaranteed an immense level of self-governance and economic freedom. Such U.S. aid would come into fruition on July 1, 1902, when the Philippine Organic Act was passed. The act approved the creation of an elected Filipino assembly that could participate in the governance of the Philippines. Also, the U.S. gradually implemented educational institutions and public infrastructure. The Philippines eventually became an independent nation on 1946. However, the Philippines would never forget the U.S. and their substantial disregard of Filipino rights. Countless Filipinos sacrificed their lives for the sake of their nation. It is safe to say that the long-lasting fight for Filipino rights to a complete and independent nation most definitely shaped what the Philippines is today.
Ng bayang insna, sumisigaw, hustisya at paglaya ng bayang api, walang katarungan, daang